Hi, this is Annie Manning with Paint the Moon Photoshop Actions and Textures, and today I'm going to do a little demonstration using my dancing lights, overlays, textures and overlays. It's kind of an interchangeable term. I like to use the word overlays for something that's a little bit more subtle, like the dancing lights set is. I'm going to use a Bokehlicious texture on this, and I'm going to use this image here. I want to point out that these textures usually work best on an image that has a background that's a little bit blurred out, shot with a shallow depth of field. This is an extreme example, and so I don't expect everybody to have images where they have shot wide open like this. However, I would warn against using them on images. I'm going to show you another example here. This one here would probably not be a good candidate for the Bokehlicious part of the set, simply because everything here is pretty much in sharp focus at anywhere you look in the image, and it's not a realistic look to have. You wouldn't have bokeh where things are in focus already, and so I wouldn't recommend. It's going to look busy and it's going to look fake if you put it on something like this. However, if you have a little bit of a blur going on there already, that's the perfect place to use it, just to enhance it a little bit more, or give it a little bit more interest. And there is included the Textures Rock action sets included with all my texture and overlay collections, and it has two actions inside. It has the apply texture action and the remove texture and keep texture color, which helps you remove all the busyness of the texture or overlay from the skin areas while retaining the tone of the texture, so it doesn't look like there's an obvious drop off if you were just to erase the texture from the skin. And the apply texture action is very versatile. It can do a lot of different things with your image. Sometimes you don't need to do other corrections to your image if you are running that action, because it can lighten and darken your image. It can warm and cool and change the temperature of your image as well. And I'm going to use that to apply this texture here. And it's telling me first to find the texture file that I want to use. And I already have it open. I'm just going to find it here, and it's the bubbles one. And I am going to click play again, and now it says to go back to my original image where I'm applying it, which is this one, and I'm just going to click play again. It's going to place it, and it tells me to use the transform tool which is already active for me. And I'm just gonna, you want to, with the bokeh textures, most textures it doesn't matter if you stretch it and it gets a little bit misproportioned, but with these ones you want to hold down your shift key while you're resizing, because you don't want the circles in the bokeh to become malformed. So I'm going to hit enter on that, and it's just going to run through and do everything else for me. And at the end, it's going to leave me with, it's telling me I can change the blending modes of my texture layer to change the look of it. And this is kind of an important thing with the bokeh overlays. They are a little bit more challenging to work with than the regular textures, and so sometimes it takes playing with the blending modes and changing it from overlay to soft light, hard light, multiply, and it always depends when you're working with textures and overlays on the image. If you have an image with a very light background and you're applying a texture on it, it's going to blend differently than if you were working with an image that had a very dark background. It's just the way that they blend together is going to be different for every different scenario and every different pairing of texture and image. And so we're going to continue here, and it says if we have any areas of skin that we want to remove the texture from, but not the tone of the texture, you can use the remove texture and keep texture color action, and don't move or flatten the layers before you run that one. So we're going to open this up here, and we've got all of these different layers here that we can turn on to change the look of the texture and how it's blending. Here's our texture layer here. I'm going to reduce it down to about 50% because I'd like it to stay very subtle. And I'm also going to drain this is drain color from the texture, and I'm going to turn it all the way up because I don't want any of that warm tone on my image. Now you can see in here that the texture's kind of, it's light and dark and it's affecting her skin tone. So I'm going to run the remove texture action next here after I go through and check all these things to make sure I don't want to change anything else. There's a vignette you can add to it. You can do the cool down or the warm it up, make it lighter and make it darker, and a contrast boost. If you really want to, I'm going to turn that off actually for this one, but if you have a texture where you want it to be more intense with the details, you can turn that on and up. I'm going to turn it off for this example because I want it just to be very subtle, and that looks good to me. I'm going to now run the remove texture action here, and it says to make sure you've done this after you've done the first action. And it's going to do this all automatically for me, so all we need to do next is just brush it off of the areas we don't want it on. Now we use a layer mask here on the top and paint with black to erase back the areas we want less texture on. And I've got my black selected. It does that for you automatically, but make sure it hasn't changed somehow if you go back in here. And I'm just gonna do that. Paint over her scarf a little bit, paint over her face, and you can see right here on our mask the before and the after. And it's a very, very subtle look I did, but it does give it a little bit more interest. And like I said, play with the blending modes on the texture layer before going into the second action if it's not looking exactly right. And if it's not a fit for your image, then try a different texture, because every pairing of texture and image is going to be a little bit different because of the different tones and the lightness and darkness of the texture and or image. It's going to look a little bit different. It's kind of an art, and you need to play around with it to get it just right sometimes, depending on what you're working with. And I hope that's helpful, and I thank you for listening to me today, and I hope you have a beautiful day.